In 1928, an American film production and distribution company called RKO Pictures was founded. Over the years, RKO has produced some classic films, although they aren't as active as they are now, with their latest film being released in 2015, which wasn't very successful. However, to celebrate the company's 90th birthday, I have decided to produce a full-length documentary about the logos that RKO have had. Some are more common than others, but most of them are extremely rare. So, without further ado, welcome to the Secret Logos of RKO, 1928 to 1998. RKO and the history behind them has always been memorable. Their main logos from 1928 to the late 50s are also memorable. But there are plenty of logos from RKO which very few people know or understand, so I am here to show and explain all of them to you. The first two main logos from RKO are this one, which was used from 1929 to 1960, and this one, which was used from 1929 to 1956. These two logos are probably the most well known from RKO, so I don't need to go into detail about them. The first that I'm going to thoroughly explain to you are the first two print logos under the Radio Keith Orpheum name. These two print logos look like this. The first one was in use from 1928 to 1930, and the second one was in use from 1930 to 1936. RKO Pictures was formed after the Keith Albee Orpheum Corporation, an American theatre chain, which was purchased in October 1928 by RCA, along with the Film Booking Offices of America, which would then create RKO Pictures, hence where the name came from. These two print logos are rare to come by, and I have not seen them on any film poster or anything at all. However, in 1930, this print logo would be seen on screen, looking like this. This on-screen logo is even rarer than the two print logos, and we have very little evidence of its existence. We do have footage of this logo, and it looks like this. We don't know much about this logo, and we only know that it was used in 1930. Some sources suggest that this logo is only for demonstration purposes. On Logopedia, the date for this logo says 1928 to 1936. This indicates two things to me. Either this logo was in use from 1928 to 1936, not just from 1930, or that more than one logo existed on screen under the Radio Keith Orpheum name, but we haven't found them yet. One of the reasons why this logo is incredibly difficult to find is because it's in colour. The colouring process seen here is called Brewster colour. It was very expensive, and with the introduction of Technicolor, a very small handful of film studios used it. This makes me believe that this logo was an experiment or a demonstration from RKO. Now that we have finished with this logo, we can move on to the international variants of the normal RKO logo. There are two known versions. The one on screen now is the Italian version, and this is the French version. There is a second Italian version which looks like this. All three logos are incredibly rare, and we don't know a whole lot about them. The French version was seen in 1952, whilst the Italian version might have been used from 1929 to 1959. We do have videos of all three versions, and they look like this. There's most likely more international logos from RKO, but the French one and the Italian one are the only ones we know. However, I might have been able to discover a Danish print logo from RKO which looks like this. There's no date, but from the looks of it, it must have been used sometime between the 20s and the 50s. I know the entire logo is in English, but from where I got it from, it said it was Danish. I'm not entirely sure though. If anyone is sure about where this logo came from, please tell me. That is all of the international logos I've been able to discover, so now we can move on to RKO Television. RKO Television was the first ever television unit from a major motion picture studio. The earliest date I got of the company was 1944. This logo retired in 1947. RKO Television becomes more important during the 1950s. In 1948, Howard Hughes, an American business magnate, gained control of RKO Pictures. After Hughes gained control of the company, RKO primarily weakened. Within weeks of taking over, Hughes had dismissed 3/4 of the workforce and production virtually shut down for 6 months. Hughes' time at RKO made the company diminish production and there were a load of expensive flops. By 1952, the studio's net loss was over $10 million. In 1953, 5 separate lawsuits were filed against Hughes, accusing him of malfeasance in his dealings. In 1953, Walt Disney ended his arrangement with RKO and set up his own distribution firm, Buena Vista Pictures. He was convinced that the studio was sinking. So, in 1955, Howard Hughes sold RKO Pictures to a different type of company, a tyre manufacturer. The mid to late 1950s was a very upsetting but also a very confusing time for RKO, but many logos came out of it. In 1943, General Tire bought the Yankee Network, a New England regional radio network. In 1950, General Tire purchased the Don Lee broadcasting system, and in 1952, they purchased the Bamberger broadcasting service, which was the owner of WOR-TV. That same year, General Tire merged its broadcasting interests into one new division, General Teleradio. What has all this got to do with RKO? Well, in December 1955, General Tire merged General Teleradio with RKO to create RKO Teleradio Pictures. This is the only on-screen footage we have of RKO Teleradio. It was seen in 1956. In case you don't know how it animates like this. I bet most of you have seen this logo before, but I also bet that most of you haven't seen the print logos from RKO Teleradio. There are 2 versions, although they are practically the same thing. The first one looks like this, and the second one looks like this. These 2 print logos were in use from 1955 to 1959. These 2 print logos look nothing like the on-screen logo, but it makes me believe that the on-screen logo is a variant. The Yankee Story is the only production we know that RKO Teleradio made. Since the name RKO Teleradio only lasted for 4 years, very few productions would have been made. We don't know a whole lot about RKO Teleradio, so someone needs to look into it. Now that I have finished talking about RKO Teleradio, I can now talk about the final 3 years for RKO Radio Pictures. After a year and a half without a notable success, General Tire shut down production at RKO for good in January 1957. Their final film, Verboten, was released on March 13th, 1959. It would be 22 years before RKO would return as a film studio. Before I move on to RKO General, I'm going to quickly mention this logo. This is the second RKO television logo, and it was in use from 1956 to 1959. Very little is known about this logo. There is no proof of a logo existing under the RKO television name between 1947 and 1956. This makes me believe that RKO television went dormant from 1947 to 1956 and was brought back by RKO Teleradio. In 1959, following the breakup of the movie studio, RKO Teleradio was renamed to RKO General. This name stuck around until 1991. This was the main logo from them. It was in use from 1962 to 1991, meaning that it was in use for 29 years. General Tire used this format as their logo from 1962 to 2007. And since General Tire owned RKO General, they changed their logo to the same thing as General Tire did, except that RKO was in place of General and General was in place of Tire. From 1959 to 1962, RKO General's logo looked like this. There is no on-screen footage of this logo yet. The print logos that RKO General used from 1959 to 1962 looked like this. This was the first one. It was in use from 1959 to 1961. This was the second one, and it was in use from 1961 to 1962. As you can tell, they look very similar to the on-screen logo. In 1966, another on-screen logo was in use, and it looks like this. It is a still logo, but we do have videos of it. It would have been nice to have this as an animated logo. I also would have preferred it to be used more. From 1959 to 1991, RKO General owned approximately 30 television and radio stations in America. Many of these stations had logos that contained the RKO General logo from 1962 to 1991. Some include this logo from KHJ, which was in use from 65 to 67, this logo from CKLW-TV from 63 to 66, and this logo from WOR-TV from 67 to 69. Some of the television stations owned by RKO General would get custom logos during the 1980s. Before we get onto that though, I need to show you one last logo from RKO Television. I was able to find these two posters from a broadcasting magazine from 1979. Both posters contain the WOR-TV logo at the time, but also an RKO Television logo. The RKO Television logo seen here is not on Logopedia. I went digging a bit more and I was able to find this poster from 1982, which also contains the RKO Television logo. The second poster I found has the RKO Television logo with a byline that reads, "A division of RKO General Inc." This means that sometime in the 1970s, RKO Television was brought back. The earliest I got was 1979. Also in 1979, another subsidiary of RKO General was created. This subsidiary would be known as the RKO Radio Networks. The RKO Radio Networks existed from 1979 to 1990. This was the first poster that illustrated this formation of RKO Radio Network. Other posters had the logo saying RKO Radio. There's two logos from RKO Radio. This was the main logo from them. The other logo looked something like this. This was the WORAM logo from the 1960s to the 1970s. Above the I and the O from radio, you can see another RKO Radio logo, although it is very pixelated. I have seen a poster from 1979 which contains the RKO Radio logo seen here in red, but I wasn't able to find it. Most broadcasting magazines from the 80s contained the main RKO Radio Networks logo. This makes me believe that the other RKO Radio logo was a placeholder. It would make sense if the previous RKO Radio Networks logo was a placeholder. Now that I have covered that, we can now move on to 1981. In 1981, RKO General finally brought back RKO Pictures. The Thunderbolt design seen here was extremely popular. It was seen as a movie logo, a home video logo, a television logo, and an FM radio logo. RKO was essentially brought back entirely because of RKO General. This logo on screen was in use from 1981 to 1987. It animates like this. The music for this logo was also quite popular, as it was used for the RKO television logos and the RKO Video Group logo. The purpose behind RKO Video Group is quite unnecessary. All it was a logo that you might see at the end of some RKO home videotapes. RKO Home Video was the main home entertainment arm for RKO Pictures. What I don't understand though is that the RKO Home Video logo is actually still the RKO Video Group logo is animated. The animation shown here is very similar to the RKO television logos. Considering that it would make more sense for this logo to be animated. This is an example of one of the RKO television logos from 1986. If the 9 looks familiar to you, it's because it's the same 9 that WORTV uses. There was one more RKO subsidiary during the 80s, RKO Nederlander. RKO Nederlander was a joint venture between RKO and the Nederlander Theatre Group. A lot of people assume that RKO Nederlander was formed in 1982. This is because this logo was first introduced in 1982. This is the only known logo from RKO Nederlander. However, there is proof showing that RKO Nederlander was formed before 1982. However, RKO Nederlander Productions formed before RKO Pictures did. This RKO Pictures logo was first introduced in 1981. I have found no evidence suggesting that RKO Pictures was formed before 1981. So, if RKO Pictures did form in 1981, who formed RKO Nederlander? The name RKO was definitely in use in the 1970s and in 1980. So, there are 2 questions left to answer. When was RKO Pictures founded? Was it 1981 or was it before 1981? And who founded RKO Nederlander? The RKO Thunderbolts took around until 1992, and by that point RKO General was defunct. The RKO Thunderbolt design went dormant from 1956 to around the mid-1970s. Let me show you all of the logos I have shown you so far from the 1980s. In 1987, the RKO Pictures logo changed to something else. RKO Pictures brought back homage to the old RKO Radio Pictures logo from 1929 and the 1981 logo. There's nothing too special about this logo other than that I really like it. But in 1992, this logo was retired and it was replaced with this. People have speculated that this logo was only used in 1992, whilst others say it was in use from 1992 to 1998. To put it simply, it was only in use in 1992. RKO only made a handful of films during the 1990s. However, they did release 2 films between 1992 and 1998, Milk and Money and Holiday Affair, and both of them were released in 1996. On both Logopedia and the CLG Wiki, there are no known logos released by RKO between 1992 and 1998. So, since they produced Milk and Money and Holiday Affair in 1996, what logo appeared on it? Was it the 1998 one or the 1992 one? Surprisingly, it is the 1998 logo that appears on Holiday Affair and Milk and Money. Also, at the end of Holiday Affair, the RKO logo scene is actually a shortened variant. As the USA pictures in association with text fades away, the RKO logo appears as a shortened version. The Jones Programming Partners logo appears as well. The 1996 logo is still in use today, although it isn't seen much since RKO has only made a handful of films since 19. But I have two more versions of this RKO logo to show you. On the UK VHS release of Milk and Money, you can see the RKO text in its print form. But this isn't even the craziest one. The craziest one is that on a VHS release of Holiday Affair, you can see a print version of the on-screen RKO logo. That is one incredible print logo. I think it's safe to conclude that although RKO isn't as active as it is now, it is one incredible company, and they've produced so many classic films from the 30s and 40s, and they will never be forgotten. There's more to RKO than you think. RKO has been part of the motion pictures industry, the television industry, the radio industry, and even the music industry. I really wish RKO was more active. RKO has only produced/distributed 15 films since 1990, whilst other major film studios have released more than that. Whatever the case is, RKO will always be a memorable company. For the past 90 years, RKO has been impressing people, and they've always impressed me. I really hope you enjoyed this documentary. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.